All right, today I'm going to take you through 5 of the worst fights, the most boring fights in UFC history. Listen, the UFC, that is where you go to watch the best fights, the best martial artists on planet Earth, explosive action, crazy styles, fights from all over the world that are willing to fight to the death.
To the death!
Nose to nose, dick to dick,
Nipple to nipple.
They will go for it every single time, but sometimes they just don't deliver. Sometimes the fights are a dud. Sometimes the crowd are booing. The referee has to step in and say, guys, come on. You've got to give the judges something to score.
There's only 2 rounds left. You got to give the judges something to score.
And some of these fighters that are on this list, by the way, they are tremendous fighters. We're talking some of the best fighters you've ever seen in the UFC. Championship fighters, Hall of Fame fighters, world champions, you name it. I'm telling you, legends' names are on this list. Now, look, not every single fight is going to be a banger, okay? Sometimes the stylistic matchup makes fighters tentative. Sometimes they're worried about the boxing, the power, the wrestling acumen that they might have, and they freeze a little bit. Maybe it's the moment. Maybe it's the bright lights, the big stage, the belts on the line, whatever the case may be. Sometimes they just freeze, and us as viewers, as fans, we are left scratching our heads and booing in the arena. Anyway, let's get into the list. All right, number 5, it's Israel Adesanya, the last style bender, a long-time champion, a future Hall of Famer, and one of the best, most successful fighters we've ever seen in the UFC, going up against a very, very scary, very mean, the ultra-athletic Yoel Romero, the soldier of God. Now, this went down at UFC 248. At this time, Israel Adesanya was taking over the sport. He'd beaten Anderson Silva. He'd won an interim title in one of the best fights you'll ever see against Kelvin Gastelum. He then went on to get the undisputed belt against Robert Whittaker and then defended against Yoel Romero. We were expecting an electrifying occasion because Yoel Romero, a man that won a medal at the Olympics, a man that is ultra explosive, flying knees for days, knockout power. Of course, he's got the wrestling acumen and he's a bit of a nasty son of a bitch as well. We thought, wow, this has got all the makings of a classic. And certainly the crowd, they were revved up for it as well because the co-main event was one of the best women's fights you'll ever see. Probably the best. Zhang Weili going up against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. That blew the roof off the building and left Joanna Jędrzejczyk never the same fighter again. Remember that massive hematoma that she had in her head. So anyway, the crowd were primed and ready for violence and ready for the main event. Sadly, this one did not deliver. Oh my God, no, it did not. Yoel Romero was standing there. He was kind of dancing. He was fainting a lot all the time. Of course, Israel Adesanya, being the kickboxer, was worried about the takedowns. So he wasn't really engaging. And it didn't take long before the crowd started to get restless. There was a lot of boos. People pulled the phones out, using them as lighters. People started talking. Yoel Romero was dancing. Israel Adesanya was being too cautious. Look, listen, I get it. I've been there. There's a lot on the line. There's the middleweight title, and you don't want to shit the bed. I know what the pressure's like, so there's absolutely no judgment. But when the referee's got to step in several times and say, guys, come on, what are you doing? Get it together. Give the judges something to score, okay? That's a sign that, listen, guys, now maybe we got to go for broke.
Guys, there's only 2 rounds left. You got to give the judges something to score. If you're getting paid for a championship fight, let's see what you do. Let's go. Back it up.
Now, when you look at the stats, throughout a 5-round fight, there was only 48 strikes landed from Israel and 40 from Yoel Romero. Out of those fights per round, in round 1, Izzy landed 2 shots. Yoel 4. Round 2, 11 for Izzy, 7 for Yoel. 3, 12 shots. Israel landed 11 in round 4 and 12 in round 14. Round 1, he landed 2 shots. Again, I'm not talking shit, the man's a legend, but that was definitely a terrible fight. One that we all want to forget. And by the way, Israel went on to have an incredible career and of course defended the belt many, many times, right? So I ain't talking shit, but I'm just saying, come on, that was a boring fight. Moving on. All right, if you are a football fan, then congratulations because the new season kicks off and we have an incredible offer for you. Football season's here, so now is the perfect time to dive into the action with DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. Right now, check this out. All new customers who bet $5 will be rewarded with $250 extra in bonus bets. Plus, you also get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. That is something everybody can celebrate. As I said, all you got to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. New customers use the code Bisping, That is the code. You bet $5. You then get $250 extra in bonus bets. Plus, you get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. As I say, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Use the promo code BISPING. Bet $5, get rewarded with $250. Only at DraftKings. To number 4, and this one hurts me to say because it involves one of my personal favorites, a legend of the sport, the great Anderson the Spider Silva, okay? I don't like to talk shit about Anderson. I was honored to share the octagon with him. But this one was a bit of a stinker, and it left Dana White absolutely furious. And it was the first time, and maybe the last time, that Dana White refused to put the belt around the champion when they've just defended the belt. He gave the belt to his manager and said, hey, listen, you do that. I'm out of here, and walked out of the fight. Now, of course, the fight I'm talking about, it's Anderson Silva versus Damian Maia, UFC 112. This went down in Abu Dhabi. And this was a big deal because Flash Entertainment had just become partners with the UFC and purchased 10% of the company. So they wanted to go around there, put on a tremendous event. And who better to bring down there than the knockout king himself? One of the best fighters that we've ever seen, an absolute legend. Anderson Silva, without a shadow of a doubt, was the man. Simple as that. It was Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre. We all wanted them to fight one day, but we never got to see it. Mainly, partly because of this. Dana White even said after this fight, I'm sorry, he doesn't deserve that. It's not going to happen. Now, the fight went down, UFC 112. Now, of course, Anderson Silva, being the tremendous kickboxer, the knockout artist that he is, going up against Damian Maia, who was a jiu-jitsu specialist, who was certainly a threat that was submitting a lot of people coming into this one. Of course, a clash of styles. But the fight was kind of just, you were left scratching your head. Anderson Silva was clearly, the better striker, okay? He outclassed him over the first couple of rounds. But then things started to get weird, and we all sat there scratching our heads going, what is he doing?
That's fucking weird, huh?
He was clowning him, he was punking him, he was slapping the mat, he was helping him get up off the canvas. He was talking to him, he wasn't going after him. He just wasn't trying to finish him. And then Damian Maia, as the fight progressed, started to have some success, started landing some shots where you might have even thought, hold on a minute, Damian Maia might just beat this guy at a striking game, mainly because Anderson Silva wasn't pulling the trigger. He wasn't going for it. Now, when you look at the striking stats, it's not that bad. We've seen worse, and we're going to see more in the top 3, I'll tell you that. 61 strikes for Anderson Silva, 10 strikes for Damian Maia. That's not surprising given the fact that he's a jiu-jitsu specialist. But throughout the fight, there were some crazy antics from Anderson Silva that nobody wants to see. People are parting ways with their money. They're paying a lot of money for tickets. They're tuning in on pay-per-view at home. They want to see violence. They want to see action. They want to see a knockout or a submission. And they want to see the fighters really sacrificing and giving their all. And that's what we always try and do. But sometimes it just doesn't work out like that. As I said, I've got nothing but respect for Anderson Silva, one of the greatest to ever step foot in the UFC's octagon. But that fight was one that nobody ever wants to experience ever again. All right, number 3 went down at UFC 83, which featured George St. Pierre getting revenge over Matt Serra in the main event. Also on that card was the middleweight debut of a future Hall of Famer and the champion that went by the name of Michael the Count Bisping. I made my middleweight debut against Charles McCarthy. He said he was going to break my arm in that one. Funnily enough, I broke his arm with a succession of tie knees from the clinch, one after the other. He defended like this, ended up breaking his own arm. After that fight, we were treated to quite the bizarre display of fighting, okay? Nate Quarry going up against Caleb Starnes. And the thing is, both of these guys were very good fighters. Of course, Nate Quarry was good. It wasn't his fault what happened. But Caleb Starnes essentially was running away the entire time. It takes 2 to tango. If you're going to get a good fight, both men need to interact. Both men need to go for it. But if one guy is literally turning away and running away the majority of the fight, it's hard to have a good old-fashioned fight. Now, Caleb Starnes, I was on season 3 of The Ultimate Fighter with him. I know that this man's a great fighter, but for whatever reason, he did not show up that night. He was Canadian, fighting in Montreal. He walked out, he had the crowd on his side, everyone was cheering for him and all the rest of it. But slowly but surely, as the fight progressed, the crowd turned on him, they started to boo, and they even cheered Nate Quarry at the end when he got the victory. At one point, Nate Quarry stood there doing the running man. He was doing some weird thing like this, just walking him down, having fun, just taking the piss out of him, mocking him, belittling him, doing all of that. Caleb Starnes is a very good fighter, was a great fighter in his day. But on that night, as I say, my God, he just didn't even show up and he didn't want to be there. Now, the thing is, sometimes when you're in there with a great fighter and you feel that you're outclassed and you feel that your timing's off and you can't hurt him, you get hit with a good shot and you're like, whoa, every time this guy connects, he's almost putting me unconscious. That's a lot to deal with, okay? So no judgment. But at the end of the day, when you sign a contract to fight, you got to do your best and you got to live by the sword, die by the sword. And if that means Nate Quarry coming at you and you got to get knocked out, well, that is what you signed up for at the end of the day. Now, when we look at the stats on this one, Caleb Starnes landed 2 strikes in round 1, 3 strikes in round 2, and had a whopping 7 strikes in round 3. All the memes went crazy on social media. Everyone was talking shit. Now, commentating on this card was Kenny Florian. It was the first time that Kenny Florian had ever commentated as well. And what a tricky fight to commentate, because it's your first one. You want to do a good job. You don't want to talk shit, but then one guy's running away the entire time. When Kenny Florian went into the octagon afterwards to do the interview with Nate Quarry won everyone over, paying homage to the great Rocky Balboa. If I can change, you can change. Maybe we all can change.
When I first came in, I heard some boos. As the fight went on, I figured if you can change, and I can change, anybody can change!
Everybody can change!
All right, number 2. This one's going to blow your mind because it involves 2 of the most exciting fighters in the sport. 2 of the biggest guys, the hardest hitters, the knockout king. I'm talking about Derrick Lewis versus Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou, we all know about the knockout power. He knocked out Stipe Miocic, became the champion of the world. The man is a wrecking machine. He's a force of nature. He hits as hard as a Ford Escort going 75 miles an hour or something like that. On the flip side, we've got Derrick Lewis. He has the record for the most knockouts ever in UFC history. And when these 2 threw down at UFC 226, everybody expected a classic. These 2 to just collide. 2 absolutely gigantic men that were going to throw down and somebody was going to get knocked out. This fight was not going to make it 5 rounds. It wasn't going to make it out of the first round. But of course it did. It went to a decision. The crowd was booing. Joe Rogan said, this is the worst heavyweight fight he has ever seen in his entire life.
Worst heavyweight fight I've ever seen. It was the worst.
Have you seen any of mine before?
Now, of course, we know why this fight didn't really deliver. It's because both men had tremendous respect for one another. Derrick Lewis is the knockout king. That's for a reason. That's because he's super explosive. And those hands, they are so dangerous. Francis Ngannou, same thing. But when 2 people meet in an octagon and they're both so dangerous and they're both relatively one-dimensional, they've only got one path to victory, that's to plant their feet and just swing and go for it and try and take somebody's head off, well, that's dangerous, right? So they're both there, they're both being tentative, they're both waiting, the crowd are getting pissed off, the crowd are booing, the referee's interjecting on multiple occasions.
You guys need to engage. Don't get me involved. Make me take points from someone taking a back step. Do this on your own. Time to fight.
The commentators are starting to talk. As I said, Joe Rogan was not impressed.
Look at these total strikes. This is crazy.
I don't think anybody was impressed.
I'm not impressed by your performance.
This is not the fight that we all signed up for. Now, in the main event, it was Daniel Cormier challenging Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight strap, moving up a weight division. And everybody thought whoever wins this fight will challenge the winner of that fight down the line. Of course, Daniel Cormier did fight Derrick Lewis, but it wasn't necessarily because of the tremendous victory that he got over Francis Ngannou, because the fight was terrible. I'm a massive fan of Derrick Lewis. I love everything about him. The knockout power, of course, the sense of humor, the post-fight speeches, my balls are hot, all the rest of it.
Derrick, why'd you take your pants off? My balls was hot. I understand.
But these numbers, these are ridiculously low. Francis Ngannou landed 1 shot out of 7 in round 1. He landed 6 in round 2 and 4 in round 3. Derrick Lewis landed 5 in round 1, 4 in round 2, and 11 shots in round 3. It was basically a shadow boxing contest between 2 of the most scariest men walking planet Earth over 15 minutes. And this finally brings us to the worst fight in the history of the UFC. And I mean this with the greatest of respect because these 2 ladies are tremendous fighters. I'm talking about Rose Namajunas, Thug Rose versus Carla Esparza. Now, coming into this one, Rose Namajunas was the champion of the world, and she'd done some incredible things. She beaten Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the longtime champion, knocked her out in round 1 at Madison Square Garden, defended against her again. Then she got slammed on her head against Jessica Andrade. But prior to that knockout, getting picked up and slammed on her head, I was watching in Brazil, the way she was moving, I was like, oh my God, nobody's ever going to beat this woman. The way that she was moving and gliding on her feet and picking her shots, it was just poetry in motion. But she did get picked up. She got slammed on the head. Then she came back. She beat Jessica Andrade. She knocked out Zhang Weili, one of the greatest fighters currently in the sport, with a beautiful head kick in 1 minute, 18 seconds of round 1. Followed it up with a tremendous war of attrition and beat Zhang Weili again. And then, of course, defended the belt again against Carla Esparza at UFC 274. Now, this was a rematch. Carla Esparza had choked out Rose Namajunas once before. Now, of course, that left a lot of damage psychologically to Rose Namajunas because she was worried about the takedown threat of Carla Esparza. And I say it all the time on commentary and in these videos. When someone's taken you down, when somebody's submitted you, you're very, very tentative. You don't want to make a mistake, so you're overly cautious. And that's what we saw throughout 5 rounds. Over 5 rounds of action, all we saw was 67 strikes landed between the two of them. Two absolutely world-class fighters. Over 5 rounds, 67 strikes. Not a lot of action. Now, coming into this one, she was on an absolute tear, Carla Esparza. She beat Vina Jandiroba. She beat Alexa Grasso, the current champion, Michelle Waterson, Marina Rodriguez, Yan Zhaonan by taking her down, getting her in a crucifix and just pounding her out. And then, of course, went up against Rose Namajunas. As I say, there wasn't a lot of action in this fight. In round 1, Carla threw 4 strikes, Rose threw 4 strikes. Now, I know how hard this sport is. I know how tough it can be psychologically. The pressure that you feel to change your life, to go out there against a world-class fighter when the entire world is watching. There is so much pressure on you, and I understand why sometimes people kind of clam up. But these are unforgettable fights, sadly, for the wrong reasons. But as I say, all of the names on this list, they're tremendous fighters. Israel Adesanya, Anderson Silva, Derek Lewis, Francis Ngannou, Rose Namajunas, some of the very best fighters we've ever seen grace the UFC's octagon. So, as I say, I'm not talking. I just thought it'd be a bit of a fun video. Somebody suggested this on Twitter, and I thought, yeah, why not? Let's give it a go. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Subscribe and ring the bell if you haven't done so already. There is videos dropping on the channel almost every single day.